This is the Law School Scout, helping top prospects get into top law schools. Today we're going to be talking about the structure of the LSAT. When people first kind of get curious about whether they should go to law school or not, oftentimes the first thing that comes up is the topic of the LSAT, or law school admission test. Because the LSAT is basically the gateway to attending law school, I wanted to start off by making this video to give you a little taste of what you're in for. Keep in mind, I'm going to be making more in-depth videos about each subject of the LSAT, but I just wanted to give you a starting point for your questions about the law school application process. So let's get right to it. The LSAT is an all-day test administered in every season of the year by the Law School Admission Council. You can sign up through the Law School Admission Council website and take the LSAT at your local university or law school. The test itself is a great tool for predicting the likelihood of success in law school. The test is 100% multiple choice with 4 graded sections, 1 experimental section, and a writing sample at the end. Test takers are not penalized for incorrect answers, so don't leave any problems blank. The writing sample itself is not graded, but it will be on file for directors of admission to view. Each section of the LSAT is 35 minutes in length with 24 to 26 questions apiece. When I talk to pre-law students, they usually ask me, do I need to go out and memorize a bunch of Supreme Court holdings, or do I need to learn how to read a contract or know a bunch about the Constitution to be successful on the LSAT? And the simple answer is no. Although these are very important aspects of the law and things that lawyers will need to learn before they pass their respective bar exams, at this point in time, the law schools you'll be applying to are not really concerned with legal knowledge and content, because those are all topics that they will teach you once you get enrolled in their program. The LSAT itself takes an interdisciplinary approach and just wants to see if you have what it takes to eventually be able to think like a lawyer. The score you ultimately get on the LSAT will help directors of admission determine whether you're a good fit for their program and whether you meet their threshold requirements. The test makers score the LSAT on a scale of 120 to 180, with the average score being about 150. But like I'll talk about in another video, if your goal is to make a top 14 T14 law program and get into big law, then you ultimately need to be up in that 170 to 175 and above range. So now I'd like to dive into the subjects of the exam and give you a brief synopsis of each section. Keep in mind, you can check out my other videos about each specific section where I'll go into more detail on what to expect. However, here I just want to answer your preliminary questions. The LSAT has 3 subjects that are tested on the exam. You have 2 sections of the logical reasoning, 1 section of analytical reasoning, 1 section of reading comprehension, and an experimental section of the aforementioned subjects. Each section is exclusive and features only 1 subject at a time. However, on game day, you will not know the order of the subjects. I'll start off by talking about the logical reasoning section because there are 2 portions of it, thus creating the opportunity to earn the most points from this section. It makes perfect sense why the test makers would assign 2 portions of logical reasoning, because this section truly is the backbone of the type of analyses you will be doing in law school. This section will ask you to analyze the structure of an argument or multiple arguments and find differences and similarities. They will also add facts to the arguments and ask you to determine what the outcomes of the arguments would be if you add additional facts. The test makers really want to highlight your ability to analogize arguments and disassociate arguments from each other. The next section featured on the LSAT is the analytical reasoning section, also commonly known as puzzles or the game section. This is usually the section of the LSAT that students have the most trouble with. And it's probably due to the fact that most pre-law students are studying political science or social sciences, and their respective curricula tend to not highlight this style of formulaic decision making. I usually see those who come from math or engineering backgrounds do the best on this section, because if you think about it, classes like calculus, physics, and geometry are concerned with proofs, theorems, orders of operation, and solving puzzles, basically. That's basically what math is. So if you come from a hard science background, you may have a slight advantage on this section. And these are the questions that I joke are like, plane A leaves the airport at 9 a.m., plane B leaves the airport at 11 a.m., and plane C leaves the airport at 2 p.m. How tall is pilot A? Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm trying to make light of how complicated these games can get, but when you're studying for the analytical reasoning, sometimes the call of the question can feel like this. But they will test your grouping and ordering skills, and they may ask you to arrange a flight schedule with minimal information. They're going to leave out key details. They may tell you when 2 out of 5 flights leave, and then they'll give you some clues to kind of guess the order of the flight schedule. Or they may give you like a college student's course schedule, and they might have you figure out which classes they're taking in what order. Based off of very, very minimal information. So you're going to have to exercise that part of your brain that can order and group at the same time. The last subject that the LSAT tests is reading comprehension. And I joke with people that when I went to law school, I basically became a professional reader. Law professors are notorious for assigning anywhere from 30 to 50 pages a night per subject. So you might have on any given night like 200 pages to read. So the test makers want to make sure that you're capable of that and that you're prepared for the journey you're about to have in law school of becoming basically, like I said, a professional reader. The skills that you'll develop when preparing for the reading comprehension section are very transferable to law school. There's something called cold calling that I'll talk about more in another video. But basically, cold calling is when a professor asks you, Mr. So-so, can you please state the facts of the case? Or Mrs. So-so, can you please give us the legal holding? And when you're reading 200 pages a night, the professors want to see if you're just skimming the material or mastering the material. And that's kind of what the reading comprehension portion of the LSAT gets you prepared for. This section will ask you to read a lengthy passage or sometimes 2 passages, and ask you to recall information about the respective passages. And the subjects you'll read about in the reading comprehension section are rarely actually about the law. The test makers usually pull topics from scholarly journals. I've seen topics ranging from space science to literature and a lot of historical topics. But the one thing in common that these passages usually have is they are lengthy, dense, and oftentimes boring. So if you're a slow reader or have trouble sort of comprehending things that you read, I encourage you to start picking up the books and start now. To supplement my LSAT prep, I would pick 1 book a week that was boring and that was about a subject that I knew nothing about, and I would read it. This drill drastically increased my reading speed and really prepared me for the reading comprehension section. And besides the LSAT, it actually kind of set me up to have a good reading endurance pace for law school. Reading is basically like running. The more you do it, the more endurance you'll have and the more you'll be able to read in one sitting. Okay, so last is the experimental section, and I'm just going to come out and tell you that you have no way of knowing what the experimental section is. On game day, they don't indicate which one's the experimental section, so you have to approach each section as if it's the real thing and go full speed. When you take the experimental section, you're basically paying it forward for future generations of LSAT takers by helping the creators of the test come up with more efficient and more challenging questions. Last but not least is the writing sample. And guys, I'm going to be honest, by the time you get to the end of the LSAT, you are going to be exhausted and the writing sample is going to kind of seem like a hassle. But I do encourage you to pump out the best writing sample that you can, because the directors of admission at the law schools you're applying to are going to be able to see this. It's pretty straightforward. They're going to give you a prompt and you're going to write about it. So be on the lookout for future videos where I'll go into more depth on each subject and include sample problems. If you'd like to run through an official full-length LSAT test from start to finish with me, shoot me an email at the address below in the description. I'd be more than happy to dissect a test with you via phone or video. If you need advice on selecting a law school or personal statement review, you can also book a coaching session with me at the same email address below in the description. Please like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications to stay tuned for the latest law school scouting reports. This is the Law School Scout, helping top prospects get into top law schools.